Good evening, everybody. This is Monica Guzman coming to you live once again on a very late weekend night. This weekend, given all the summer world competitions that are going on, I decided to talk about the world competes against the American. And the second half of this is the Africanization of the West. Because it all, again, for me, all of these topics that I'm discussing tie in together. My angle is sports, namely American baseball. So, what's happening in MLB is a reflection of what happened to America. And what's happening in professional sports in the United States, as well as at least across the West, also reflects what happened to America and what happened to the rest of the Western countries, namely France and England. So let me start off with MLB as an example. So what do I mean about the world competes against the American? And it has both a literal sense and then it's obvious too, right? In sports, when there's a competition, maybe not in 2021, but it was definitely the case in a decade ago and more. The United States has always been the target of other countries, right? The United States has the most Olympic gold medals. So at the Olympics, the United States is always the target. Everyone wants to beat the United States. If you beat the United States, you beat the standard bearer, right? In soccer, it's not the United States, but soccer is not really an American sport anyway. But in soccer, it's more all the countries want to beat Mexico, or all the countries for a long time wanted to beat France. England's another one that's definitely a target. So the NFL is at least 60% African. The NBA is definitely at least 60% African. MLB has a very small percentage of Africans, but that's because baseball's a high IQ sport. So Africans and American baseball don't really go together. They did have the Negro Leagues, which is a completely different standard than American baseball. And in the future, I'm going to separate the two standards for you so that it's more obvious to people what I mean by American baseball and the Negro League standard baseball. And for me, the Negro Leagues were just a glorified Dominican Winter League. So the world competes against the American because the American is the standard bearer in sports, in innovation, in way of living, right? Russia, or was it still the USSR in the 80s? Russians were all about American culture. At that time, it was denim. It was rock and roll. It was freedom. It was the American flag. And so, right, that hockey game that took place was against Russia in the 80s, right? So the world targets the American because the Americans set the standard. We used to pride freedom of speech. We used to pride individualism. We used to pride beauty, physicality, and that is no longer the case. Now, if you watched my other streams, you know that that's not the case anymore because Americans don't run America. America has been on a downward spiral. About the 1940s, maybe 1934, when GDP was introduced. Definitely by the time the 1960s rolled around, 1962, 1963, two court cases removed two important components of American culture. They removed Bible study from public schools, and they also removed prayer from public schools. So that shows you right there that two court cases in the 1960s essentially knocked out the First Amendment. So when we talk about in 2021 freedom of speech, we're defending what's left of it. Really, we've got to roll things back a lot further than just what's happening right now in 2021. We've got to roll things pretty far back. So the world competes against the American because the world envies the American, right? The American who used to be the Americans that people targeted. Babe Ruth, definitely larger than life. Your Clint Eastwoods, right? The ultimate hetero male. Other American icons, definitely Donald Trump. Trump in the early 2000s had a huge following. The Apprentice gave him a really huge following on network television. And I mean, we've all seen the pictures of models throwing themselves at him. We've all seen him hanging out with American professional athletes. Donald Trump was definitely an American icon before he ran and won president of the United States. So right now, one of the reasons why I honestly can't name a global American icon is because the American icons are being replaced with Africans. I mean, you know, if you listen to MLB's nonsense, they try to throw at you Bo Jackson, or they try to throw at you Willie Mays, Jackie Robinson, Hank Aaron. And these men are simply Africans who did a lot of tricks in MLB uniforms, but they don't have any substance behind them. Babe Ruth, on the other hand, was the best of both worlds. Babe Ruth had both character ethic and personality ethic, and he's the only one. Michael Jordan definitely comes in second to Babe Ruth in the sense that Jordan definitely also has, to this day, right, has personality ethic and character ethic. I mean, for me, those Be Like Mike, the jingle, the commercial, just it's stuck. It definitely stuck. And so when you think about it right now, can you think of American icons? Can you think of somebody super popular at the Olympics right now? Can you think of MLB players, NFL players, NBA players, even NHL? I mean, NHL isn't American either. It's more Canadian, right? And I mean, Tom Brady for sure, but I think what's going to happen is Tom Brady's going to find out that his NFL popularity doesn't translate into other realms. For example, let's say he decides to go a political route. Given that he outed himself, we'll see what kind of support he garners. Whereas when Walter Johnson ran for office, Christy Mathewson, A.G. Spalding ran for office. So when those guys ran for office, they didn't alienate anybody, right? They didn't come out and reveal themselves as Marxists. So they garnered political support coming off of the baseball fields, because the American baseball pioneers were Americans, just like the people who watched them, as opposed to today where athletes, professional athletes, purposely separate themselves from the American population into their Marxist population. So I did watch a portion of the speech that Tom Brady gave at the White House. And honestly, that wasn't what bothered me about Tom Brady. What bothered me was the fact that Tom Brady didn't take the time on Twitter to acknowledge American Independence Day. I understand he was preparing for the match, but I think that a Babe Ruth, a Walter Johnson, a Honus Wagner, a Cy Young would have taken the time to acknowledge American Independence Day, regardless of what was going on for them on the baseball fields. And so for me, what Tom Brady did at the White House was like, oh yeah, of course. He didn't take the time. He didn't even set up you can schedule your tweets. He didn't even schedule a tweet to acknowledge American Independence Day. So the Biden stuff was just like, yeah, of course, because I'm tying it into some stuff that I noticed about his brand a year ago. So I'm not surprised. And I'm not even disappointed anymore, because it's like, I'm right. I saw the signs and I'm right. So again, the world competes against the American. So right now, MLB has failed to push forward their African players because their African players don't perform. So they've turned to pushing forward Dominican players whom have a 90% lineage to African slaves. And I wouldn't call one of them performing. They just have invested so much into the narrative that, I mean, they've invested so much into building the narrative around him that they've plastered him everywhere. At least if you play video games, you see him. If you're on social media, you see him. But are people actually watching him play? We'll see at the end of the season when the numbers come out. Now, I understand the violence that Africans on American soil are waging against the Asian community, and it is obviously something super awful. However, we can't separate what other Asians are doing on American soil either. So, for example, MLB has a cozy relationship with China, even though China has a completely different political ideology. But I was actually looking at some stuff today, and MLB's cozy relationship with China makes sense. Did you know that the Jewish community had a hand in developing the communist ideology of China? I didn't know that before today, and now I do. So, I mean, nothing's really shocking anymore at this point. If you look at stuff enough, you realize it falls in line with everything else. So like the Tom Brady stuff for me, it's like, I saw this coming. I didn't think he was going to do what he did at the White House, but it's not shocking anymore because it falls in line with all other points that have accumulated into a trend. So basically, the Mike Trout narrative is over, right? Mike Trout's now suffering from injuries, which have knocked him off the narrative pedestal that MLB Marxists had placed him on. I personally take a little bit of credit for helping knock over that narrative, not because it has nothing to do with the fact that Mike Trout is white. It's just that Mike Trout is just another MLB player. He's going to turn out to be mediocre at best, like many, many others. The issue with Mike Trout is that because he lowered the bar, because the narrative surrounding him helped lower the bar, it's not Mike Trout per se, it's what comes after Mike Trout that was the issue. So the narrative of over Mike Trout needed to be knocked off. For example, Madison Bumgarner is one of my favorite MLB players. I didn't watch his 7-inning no-hit game, but I did watch several of the highlights. Now, I personally couldn't celebrate his 7-inning no-hitter, not because of Madison Bumgarner, but what comes after Madison Bumgarner, right? So Mad Bum is a 3-time World Series champion. He was Sportsman of the Year. He won MVP. San Francisco loved him. And other people who appreciate pitching also admired his work. And Mad Bum is pretty fierce at the plate. I believe he's been striking out a lot this season. I haven't had the opportunity to check into what's happening with Mad Bum this season, but given the fact that when I saw the announcement that he went to Arizona over some of the other teams, I was disappointed because Zach Greinke had just gotten out of Arizona, and I watched what happened to Zach Greinke in the time that he was there. There were several games where he should have won, but his defense behind him was awful. So several errors were made during games that he pitched, which impacted his overall record. And then Zach Greinke also has his I don't know if it's anxiety. So Zach Greinke is a Mad Bum, right? Like, I don't know how much self-defense Zach Greinke practiced in Arizona. He didn't have to practice any of it when he was with the Dodgers because he was so spectacular and he was able to pitch. At that time, pitchers could still pitch several innings. So he was in control of his pitching destiny. But in Arizona, it was a different story, especially when Torey Lovullo, that year that he received the Tommy Lasorda, so he received the Tommy Lasorda Award in the offseason. That season that came in was when they basically flipped Arizona into an analytics team 100%. And Greinke was still there. So Greinke was impacted even further by decisions being made by front office loser nerds. So given what had happened, what I saw happen to Zach Greinke in Arizona, Mad Bum going there, I was not thrilled about at all. I had hoped he would have at least gone to like San Diego, but there could have been a decision that no other team was going to take him anyways, right? Because we know that the teams do collude with each other so that the narrative plays out according to plan. And let me give you the example. So Tom Brady versus Patrick Mahomes in last year's Super Bowl. And this is the reason why, as far as Tom Brady's NFL career is concerned, I will be there to defend him. Now, if Tom Brady going forward I don't know if Tom Brady will flip Marxist 100%, meaning, is Tom Brady going to start losing games? I believe that he has too much competitive spirit in him to do what Jimmy Garoppolo did in the previous Super Bowl, where Jimmy Garoppolo basically threw the game to make Patrick Mahomes a champion. So last year's Super Bowl was a collision of a narrative versus a football player. And because it was Tom Brady was going to win. Tom Brady was not going to roll over and play dead for the narrative, Patrick Mahomes. Again, this could change going forward. Tom Brady has his rings, has several accomplishments. He doesn't have the perfect season under his belt. So let's see if that motivates him or if he also rolls over and plays dead. We're going to find out. So Mad Bum's no hitter. So I personally cannot celebrate Mad Bum's no hitter, not because I don't respect what Mad Bum did that day, but because it impacts what comes after. So we know that MLB doesn't allow their pitchers to pitch complete games, let alone pitch, 7 innings. So we don't know if there could be a change in the rules that going forward, all games are going to be 7 innings. So all of a sudden, you've got these engineered MLB players pitching complete games 7 innings, right? And so that's why we don't allow the bar to be lowered. Even though it was Mad Bum who pitched an outstanding game that day, it's not about Mad Bum. It's what comes after Mad Bum. And that's what happened with Mike Trout. It's not Mike Trout per se, it's what comes after Mike Trout. That was my specific concern. It's too bad when guys allow themselves to be pawns. It opens them to criticism. And again, it's not me trying to pick on them. It's what comes after. That's my specific concern. Okay, so now that Mike Trout's out of the picture, MLB needs new narratives, and they've chosen a Dominican and a Japanese player. So I encourage everybody to look up the origin of stuff. And I'm not talking about the origin of man or the origin of religion. I'm talking about things that we hear about in 2021. For example, I talked about the origin of racism. The Jewish community that ran away from Germany after they made their bed and they didn't want to sleep in it brought the concept of racism with them to American soil. So they go around calling whites racists because they called the Nazis, the National Socialists, racist. Why did they call them racist? Because the Nazis, again, National Socialism, so national German identity, basically, to them was racist, even though Germany isn't Jewish. Germany's German. They had the audacity to call Germans on their own soil racist, the same way that Jews call Americans on their own soil racist. Again, why? Because the Jewish community from the Frankfurt School adopted Karl Marx's ideologies, even though apparently Marx was an anti-Semite. But that did not stop them from adopting his ideologies and building upon them. Thus, critical theory. Critical theory seeks to overthrow the majority. I've said this several times, and I'm going to continue to say it. Critical theory seeks to overthrow the majority. So the Jews in America could literally cross the border and conduct critical theory in Mexico. and that would lead to the overthrow of the Mexican majority in Mexico. That is why I personally will defend America against critical theory, what's going on within the Jewish community that's basically managed to infiltrate all organizations with authority, including the government, professional sports, corporations, entertainment, and why we need to temper that stuff down and then get rid of it. And I'm talking about critical theory, not human beings, in case some of you are too low IQ to understand that. Okay. So something else that I looked up was the concept of the American dream. I asked myself, did an American say that? And when I first started looking that up, it sounded like an American did say the American dream. But you've got to dig deeper into all of these things every single time. So the American dream was some sort of essay written by someone who was living on American soil at the time, but his origin is Venezuelan. So maybe that explains why MLB, which is run by the Jewish community, is so big on recruiting so many Venezuelans, is because the concept of the American dream comes from a Venezuelan. And then it makes sense, right? Why would an American state that living in America is the American dream? Again, Ty Cobb, Cap Anson were just doing their thing, living on their own soil that their ancestors helped to plow and helped to nurture and helped to develop and spread. So again, Cap Anson, Ty Cobb, they're just living in their own country, right? And they come the Jews who are like, dude, you guys are racist because you're white. How utterly insane is that? Okay. So the concept of the American dream comes from someone who has origins from Venezuela, though. So he's not an American, right? It wasn't an American who built this this concept. Okay, so again, the violence being waged against Asians on American soil by Africans is utterly awful. But that walks into the Africanization of the West. It's a good idea for people who don't know to look up what's happening in South Africa. This is why people like your Scott Adams, who will say, oh, you can't call them grifters. That's such nonsense. He is also somebody who said, and Nick Nolte, you do this too. Oh, don't look at those videos of Africans attacking whites. They don't happen everywhere and they don't happen all the time. Well, South Africa is definitely descending into a even more dangerous zone for the whites living there than it was 4 years ago. There are Africans, I mean, they're whipping white landowners in South Africa right now. They were already stealing their cars. They were already looting stores, right? H&M had to shut down a store over there. But now it's really descending further into chaos. And so the Africanization of America is real. And the way they're doing it is simply through violence. So the violence is spreading out. Eventually, it's going to hit your dear countryside areas. It's going to crawl in your direction too. It's just a matter of time. So the Africanization of the West is very real. And I think I'm going to dive into it in more detail tomorrow. Maybe I'll walk back into it a little bit tonight, but I think I'm going to save that for tomorrow. So again, the violence being waged against Asians on American soil by Africans is awful, but that is African culture. That's what happened in Africa when I can't pronounce his name, but the dude that was over here in the United States studying at an American college being radicalized by a Pan-African who went back to Africa, I believe it was Ghana, and became dictator, and there was a military coup against him. That's how he knocked down the colonization of the country by the English. They basically kicked the English out, I guess, when Africa went Marxist, and then the African economy started to fall. Okay, so MLB is trying to sell MLB with a Dominican player and a Japanese player. And there was an article written by a Japanese who writes for the LA Times, stating that, well, at least the LA Times caption says that Ohtani never pictured himself playing in Japan. So Ohtani is a Japanese player, but he didn't want to play in Japan. Okay. He wanted to play in the United States. So that's why I bring up the concept of the American dream. I was like, okay, so Ohtani basically wanted to be the part of the American dream. But where does the American dream come from? It doesn't come from an American. It comes from a Venezuelan. So Ohtani wants to succeed as a star using another country's resources. And I bring that up because part of this specific LA Times story published on July 12, 2021 lists other Japanese or Japanese adjacent athletes who are succeeding globally. But they're not doing this in Japan. They're doing it on American soil with American resources. So if we took away the American resources from these Japanese players, would they still be thriving? Obviously not. So they list Shohei Ohtani, Naomi Osaka, Hideki Matsuyama, Naoya Inoue, Yuzuru Hanyu, Ryu Hachimura. Okay, so the last three, I don't know who they are. I know who Naomi Osaka is, and I know who Shohei Ohtani is. Hideki Matsuyama, I'm not sure if he's another MLB player. So again, Naomi Osaka, we all know that the only reason why she rose to fame is because she's got American resources backing her. Same thing with Shohei Ohtani. American resources are backing him. No matter how you slice it or dice it, MLB uses American resources to this day, even though the Jews are basically raping American resources and printing money. It's still off of the backs of Americans. So they cannot claim that they are funding it. As long as MLB remains on American soil, you are using American resources. You are taking advantage of American taxpayer dollars off of the backs of Americans. If you want to prove that you can succeed without American resources, please go ahead, pack up, and move to China, since now we know that the Jews helped establish communism over there. Um, all right. So the narrative of Shohei Ohtani is amazing to me, and I'm going to prove to you that Shohei Ohtani is nothing more than a narrative. Once I start doing side by side with statistics and comparison and contrast with the American baseball pioneers. So basically, they're trying to use Ohtani to cancel Babe Ruth, and that's never going to happen. Why? Because Babe Ruth never had to have surgery. Babe Ruth never needed surgery to perform. Babe Ruth was born to play baseball. Science studied Babe Ruth because they were trying to figure out how this man could hit the ball, how this man could pitch, how this man was so good at baseball because he was born to play baseball. And any loser nerd that tells you that baseball players, pitchers, poets are made not born is just a loser nerd. I have, if you haven't noticed, I have great disgust in loser nerds or over loser nerds. Um, I I don't know if it has to do with the fact that I grew up or am lucky enough to have a dad who was alpha in his own way. Um, when I talk about alphas, you don't need to be a man amongst men. You don't have to be a pillar of your community. You don't have to be the leader of the pack, but you can still be alpha of your household. And my dad is still the alpha of the household. To this day, he is alpha of his household. And as long as I don't want to get into it tonight, but Marxist men and the women who rule them may be something I'm going to expand on. There are definitely Marxist males, professional athletes who have married women who rule over them. And so I agree that a man who doesn't find a woman who has natural beauty is probably not very confident. There's got to be something about her, right? Like, I'm not talking about supermodels. American women are naturally beautiful women, especially when you're young. Future episodes, I'm going to talk about the fact that young women, you don't need makeup. You just need a good skincare routine. Wash your face. You don't even have to use that many products. For example, I have oily skin. I don't use moisturizer. My skin self-moisturizes. I could bottle it up and sell it. So young women, makeup, you don't need it. You definitely don't need a lot of products. Maybe a trip to an esthetician who will extract stuff from your skin, but you really don't need to go beyond that. Okay, so there's something to that. I agree that a man who doesn't seek out a naturally beautiful spouse may lack some confidence. But what we're seeing is professional athletes pushed to marry. It's not even your Cindy Crawfords and your Heidi Klums. It is women who are going to crush you because you don't know how to stand your ground against her. So she crushes you to the ground. She rules the home. As opposed to the rooster ruling the home, the hen rules the home, which is not good. That just does not end well. And it doesn't end well. It does not end well. So, okay. Totally off on a tangent. I need to find my place. Way off on a tangent on that one. I apologize. So let's go back to Shohei Ohtani so I can pick up my last thought. So Shohei Ohtani is just another narrative that MLB is going to push forward, that I'm going to crush when I compare and contrast him to the American baseball pioneers and to Babe Ruth. I can't. I went off on a big tangent on that one. I apologize. So Shohei Ohtani is no Babe Ruth, and we're gonna find that out. So one MLB player who was several MLB players who have gone on home run tears and in injuries. So there was one who apparently had a home run every game for like 6 games, went on the injured list. There's another player who was having home runs, who hit home runs every so often for an extended period of time. Now he's on the injured list. So given the fact that 2020 was basically an off season for several MLB players, the fact that they're on a tear in 2021 makes sense because they didn't play last year. So they came back this season super refreshed. And we're going to find out that Ohtani basically falls in that category. He's just taking advantage of the non-season that took place in 2020. And I will help prove a couple of other things that show that he will never come close to Babe Ruth. He will never come close to Babe Ruth's accomplishments. No matter how hard Marxist Joe Madden tries to push him forward on a team that, I mean, where are they right now? 11 games behind first place in their AL West division. I mean, they're in 4th place. And actually, this builds on the theory that I have that MLB narratives always come from poor teams because it allows the narratives to compile. I'm pretty sure that's going to be the case for Hank Aaron. That's definitely been the case for Mike Trout. And that's going to be the case, I mean, Barry Bonds, right? Steroids, Barry Bonds. Who else is another super favorite of MLB Marxist that was a compiler on sucky teams? There are several, right? Basically almost every MLB candidate or almost every MLB MVP winner has come from a sucky team, because when they were on those sucky teams, they had the opportunity to compile stats. It was true for A-Rod while he was doing steroids in Texas. It's been true for a couple of others that I can't think of off the top of my head, but I will show you the statistics that prove me correct. And again, this isn't about pride. I did not think all of this stuff was going to lead me here where I am in my research, in my compiling of statistics, in my research. This isn't what I thought was going to happen. I, to this day, thought that what was happening with the 2017 LA Dodgers was just the work of a couple of nerds in MLB. I had no idea that I would end up showing how what's happening in MLB reflects what's happening in America. The same people leading MLB are leading America. Thus, we get these parallels between the two situations. Um, okay, so the world competes against the American. Okay, so what else? How did I even reach this topic for this weekend? So ESPN purposely employs diversity, right? They don't employ very many Americans anymore. They definitely don't employ anybody who would have voted or who did vote for Trump. So within all that diversity, as ESPN employs a couple of Asians. And while the Otani narrative is going on, some of these Asians that work for ESPN have expressed their pride in a Japanese player being propped up so highly by what used to be an American professional sport. And that's when I realized that the American male is being encouraged to sit on his balls all day, smoke pot, and play video games. So he's gaining weight. So he's participating in gluttony and obesity. Second, he's killing his brain cells, thus he's becoming stupid. That's what pot does. Pot kills your brain cells. Now, if you are in a poor state of health that you need pot, you've got to, this is the Darwinist in me coming out. I think you've got to make peace with what's happening to your life. Maybe you weren't meant to live very long. So I do agree with people who, for example, in Mexico, there are communities where people with terminal illnesses live out the rest of their life because these communities are located on the beaches or near the beaches. So you know you're about to keel over. So you want to enjoy what you have left of your life in a beautiful setting where your money definitely goes a long way. And Mexico is happy to cater to these people. So if you need pot to stay alive, I am going to tackle the topic, and a lot of people aren't going to like it because that's where we're at right now, where we help keep the weakest among us alive. Look, I have gone through several health screenings, so I was very productive during lockdown. I did a lot of reading in 2020, and I also used it to I felt it was a good time to get all my health screenings done because I was like, you know what? People don't want to go outside. Maybe there'll be more appointments available to see medical professionals and all that fun stuff, right? And I'm one of those people that doesn't enjoy going to the doctor because when I've been to the doctor in the past, I get told that everything's fine. And it's so not that I'm wishing for something to be wrong with me. And obviously, thank you to God for keeping me healthy, despite some poor choices that I've made in the past, food wise. But obviously, thank you to God for giving me an awesome metabolism and giving me good enough genes. Obviously, anything can happen. Cancer is caused in some people due to environmental conditions. For example, there's a family friend, not my direct family, but like an acquaintance, somebody that the extended family knows, who did develop cancer because he used to prepare and sell chicharrones, which are you produce them by frying pig skin, I think. So you fry pig skin and you get chicharrones. And do you know that when you fry food, the oil releases gases? And if you breathe in those gases on a consistent basis, you can develop cancer. And this man, the chicharronero, I think they called him, breathed in the gases caused by frying the pig's skin in the oil. And he was breathing them in so often that he did develop cancer and he passed away. So, yes, cancer can be developed due to environmental reasons. Okay, so I've been through several health screenings, and I'm specifically going to talk to you about one of them in the future. Probably not on YouTube. At that point, maybe I'll go into a subscriber platform and talk about it there. But I can, so I think one of the reasons why young women aren't let in on all the giving birth realities is because people don't want to scare them out of giving birth. Now, for a long time, I heard that giving birth is the worst pain a woman can experience. I can tell you that that is not true. There is a pain that a woman can experience that is way worse than giving birth. I can tell you that, and I will talk about it in a future stream, because we've got to talk about that. We've definitely have to talk about that. Now, I had my kid and I'm older. So the reason why I experienced it was because I was going through several health screenings, and all those health screenings to this point have turned out good. And I'm thankful to God for giving me good health. And I'm thankful to God for directing me to get these health screenings in the first place, because it's wonderful peace of mind. But it's been an adventure. It's been an adventure. So, okay. So, another insane tangent that I went on. But, okay, so let me go back to the Asian reporters or sports journalists that work for ESPN. During this Otani narrative season, it showed when the comments from these two individuals, they tweeted them out. When they tweeted them out, and I've ran into them on my feed, I realized that the world is competing against the American. Oh, so while Americans are being encouraged, while the males are being encouraged to sit on their balls all day and play video games and smoke pot so that you kill your brain cells while you're getting fat and you're damaging your sperm's DNA, the rest of the world isn't doing that. The American male is being encouraged to destroy himself while the rest of the world's males are getting fit, getting healthy. They can't compete at the American level, but they compete at their own. But they outpace the American level because the American level is falling while theirs is basically staying the same. So MLB can sell Otani because there are no American baseball players. There are no American baseball players. There's just a lot of Marxist baseball players like Garrett Cole, Justin Verlander, Clayton Kershaw, Walker Buehler. I don't know if Max Muncy is a Marxist. It's just with Max Muncy, I can't. The way that he came to the Dodgers, I can't be in his corner, because otherwise they're going to try to do that with other players too. And again, it's not about Max Muncy, it's what comes after Max Muncy, and it's really not fair. But they're trying to use so many of you guys as pawns, and it's not, it sucks, but it's what comes after. I can't be in Max Muncy's corner for that reason. So there's a lot of Marxists running around. And then when you do have your baseball players, Madison Bumgarner, Zach Greinke, DJ LeMahieu, Zach Greinke keeps getting pulled in the 6th inning. I don't know what's going on with Mad Bum, but I mean, it's gotta suck to be on a team that's like way under 500 still, right? Uh, I mean, Mad Bum is a champion. He's badass. He's rodeo badass, and he's stuck on the suckiest team ever. So, obviously he can't say anything, but fans, we can say, dude, that's gotta suck. But okay. So, and then DJ LeMahieu, I I'm not sure what's going on. I don't know if the fact that the ball change is still impacting him, or please, gosh, what David John? Is it David John? Don't go Marxist, man. If you want people like me to be able to make a Hall of Fame case for you, you just cannot go Marxist, dude. Don't go Marxist, man. Okay, so the American baseball players are being stepped on, specifically pushed down, so that they can't raise the level up. The way Tom Brady raised the bar in the NFL last season, right? Tom Brady wasn't going to lose to the narrative. Tom Brady was going to play Tom Brady's game, and he led his team to a championship, and it was really awesome. I think it's wonderful that their front office didn't work against them the way Andrew Friedman, Farhan Zaidi worked against the Dodgers in 2017 and 2018. I mean, for me, that was really awesome to see that the front office was working for the team as opposed to against the team, because I had seen something completely different for several years in MLB. Um, and I it is what it is with Tom Brady. Uh, it just shows why the Tom Brady case shows why you don't worship man. It's another maybe that's what I needed, right? I needed a reminder from God that, look, Tom Brady helps you make your case for a lot of things, but you don't ever worship man. You don't worship man because he's corruptible. He can turn out to be something different than what you thought he was. The only perfect being out there is the Son of God, right? And so maybe I needed that reminder, and that's why the Tom Brady stuff had to happen, or at least the outside of his uniform stuff had to happen. And it is what it is, right? Okay. So back to the Asian ESPN sports journalist. So with Ohtani, they expressed pride for their Asian heritage. And that was a little bit shocking to me, because I'm used to hearing sports journalists, MLB front office loser nerds, MLB players say winning doesn't matter anymore. Doesn't matter anymore. I'm used to them hearing them say that. So to hear these Asian ESPN sports journalists express pride in what Ohtani is doing, even though Ohtani's just a narrative, was a little bit shocking. But I realized that the only one being encouraged to crush themselves is the American, but all the other cultures are busy raising their value, their competitive spirit, their pride in their heritages. Just like when the Israeli team qualified for the Olympics, Israeli or Jewish sports journalists express pride in that. Not only that, there is a documentary being made on the team. So, hey, winning doesn't matter for you Americans, but guess what? Jews, Asians, bunch of other people, winning does matter for them. So you are buying into this crush yourself narrative while they are busy building themselves up. So specifically, the male Asian sports journalist for ESPN tweeted out that Ohtani would shatter how Westerners, specifically Americans, see the Asian male. So I guess to him, we Americans, because I do put myself in the American basket, I have the American mindset. Therefore, to me, at least I have the American mindset. I mean, I may not have the blood lineage, but I definitely have the mindset. So we see apparently Asian males as weak. And I was like, okay, well, why would he say that? I personally had not thought that. I'm not sure if I ever thought that about Asians, let alone Japanese males, but apparently he does. So I was like, you know what? Why would he say that? And then I remembered that there's that Korean pop group who defended Harry Styles wearing women's clothing, and then they themselves are like skinny, beta looking dudes. I was like, oh, he must be talking about that. No wonder Americans see Asian males as frail beings. So, okay, whatever, right? It is what it is. So for them, Ohtani brings them pride because, again, how do you get an Ohtani looking like he is doing so well? You had to crush the American baseball player first. And that is what MLB did. Bryce Harper never developed into the narrative that he was supposed to become. And then you've got willing participants. Again, Clayton Kershaw, Walker Buehler, Justin Verlander, Adam Wainwright, Garrett Cole, like cheaters, right? So it is what it is. But so tonight, the takeaway that I hope you guys take is the American male is being encouraged to sit on his balls all day playing video games, smoke pot, killing your brain cells while you're getting fat, damaging your DNA, your sperm's DNA. But just because they're encouraging you to crush yourself doesn't mean that that's what the other cultures on American soil are doing. Asian sports journalists from ESPN expressed pride in what Ohtani's doing. One of the males specifically said, oh, Ohtani's going to shatter the way that Americans see Asian men. So while you are buying into the narrative of getting stupider, getting fat, or getting stupid, getting fat, getting lazy, the other cultures around you are not doing the same thing. It's like women. American women are beautiful. They're naturally beautiful. But you women are being encouraged to be whores. American women are encouraged to dye their hair weird colors. You're being encouraged to look like males. You are being encouraged to damage your beauty in an effort, because we see what's happening, right? The beauty, they're trying to switch. They want American women to be ugly so that they can redefine the beauty standard. We saw it with Kamala Harris's stepdaughter. She is what's being sold as the new beautiful, as opposed to American women like Cindy Crawford in her heyday was one of the standards for American beauty. Obviously, that was the time when there was Heidi Klum, and there was Claudia Schiffer. They're trying to turn over the table, So tomorrow I'm going to talk about this a little bit more, get my thoughts together a little bit more, and then I'm going to summarize what I talked about tonight, and then I'm going to expand on the Africanization of the West. Super important topic. And then also, heads up, I will not be live streaming the following 2 weeks. I'm going to use the time to prepare for August 12th, August 13th, August 16th. 3 wonderful days in American baseball history. It's not going to be an official launch, but I will be increasing my formatting. So I'm hoping to be able to have my side-by-side so that you can see the statistics that I start talking about. I'm looking forward to talking about Christy Mathewson. I'm a little bit distrusting just because he was so collegiate in his thinking. I don't want to praise Christy Mathewson so much that the analytics crowd tries to run with it. But hopefully, I mean, maybe Zach Greinke is the current Christy Mathewson. I think that's a really great honor to compare him to Christy Mathewson. Christy Mathewson's book is pretty awesome. He wrote some fiction stuff, but he also wrote kind of an autobiography. And I'm rereading it, and just the first few pages that I've reread are really great stories. And if I compare Zach Greinke to Christy Mathewson, then definitely Mad Bum is 2021's Walter Johnson, and I believe that's another great honor. So tomorrow night, I will continue on the theme of the world competes against the American and the Africanization of the West. And I will remind you that I won't be streaming live for the following 2 weeks, but I will be back August 12th live, and that will be Christy Mathewson Day. It will probably be me streaming in the morning. So I'm going to test daytime hours and see how that goes. And then we'll see how the rest of August goes based on those experiences. And then we've got A.G. Spalding week, first thing September. And then we'll see what direction I keep heading in at that point. Again, my point for doing this stuff is just to share another perspective. To give you guys another perspective on what's happening in America using American baseball history and American history from the mid-1800s to about the 1930s, 1940s at the latest. I think it's good insight, and I think it gives us a goal of how far back we need to roll stuff back in America. So I hope everybody has a wonderful Sunday. I will be back tomorrow evening. See you then. Thank you.